BART takes the First Amendment for a ride. On August 11, 2011, the Bay Area Rapid Transit officials shut down cell phone service to avoid any potential violence by protesters who were protesting against the BART police. They also feared that cell phones would be used to organize so-called flash mob demonstrations. The reason for the protest was due to the killing of a homeless man by BART police. Critics felt that this was another in a series of excessive force used by BART police that resulted in the death of a citizen. Subsequent protests occurred in response to the cell phone shutoff due to critics and demonstrators who viewed it as an infringement of the First Amendment right of freedom of speech. BART police showed up in full riot gear and warned demonstrators to leave or they would be arrested. Many did leave, however, 30 to 40 protesters, including a dozen journalists, were arrested. BART police defended their actions based on Penal Code 369I, stating that there was imminent danger to passengers and citizens. First Amendment freedoms of speech and of the press were definitely compromised by BART officials. In response, Ward Bushy, editor of the San Francisco Chronicle, stated, "We recognize that BART police officers have a job to do, but they also must allow reporters to cover the news." As early as 1735, journalists and protesters have met with opposition. Most notable was the case of John Peter Zenger, where he was a newspaper publisher who had to defend himself against libel charges in 1735 when the government did not like what he had to say. The trial is often seen as the cornerstone court case of American freedom of the press. In 1773, during the Boston Tea Party, protesters were dumping tea in the Boston harbor, while journalists provided eyewitness news reporting in the Massachusetts Gazette and the Boston Weekly Newsletter, much to the disapproval of Ben Franklin, who called for retribution. The railroads also encountered difficulties with the courts. In 1886, Santa Clara County versus Southern Pacific Railroad went to court to try and get the railroad judged to have human rights for the railroad as the same as an individual citizen would have. They lost that case, but eventually they were able to achieve that. In 1893, though, U.S. versus Denver Railroads, it was found that they had unlawfully seized lumber to build their railroad tracks. More recently, in 1972, cases were centering more around news gathering, and in the case of Brandsburg versus Hayes, it was found that there needs to be protection for journalists seeking out the news. However, in 1991, in the Cohen versus Cowles media case, it was found that protection applied only to news that was lawfully gathered. In the case of BART's action, this was an unprecedented measure by BART in the form of a cyber shutdown that was based on what might happen, to which law professor Len Niehoff described as positively Orwellian. Shutting down a cell phone service was definitely affecting fundamental rights of innocent commuters using the BART system. This is, for many, a way of life to communicate, to conduct business, to stay in touch with friends and family. Also, When the BART police showed up in full riot gear, it only reinforced concerns of excessive force, which is why they were protesting in the first place. And blocking the entrance to the BART stations created an emergency for some commuters who were now unable to communicate their condition to their friends and family. Many have been heard to say that freedom isn't free. Not only must one keep a vigil over freedom, one must be ready to take a stand for freedom. Silence is not golden, silence is acceptance. Even small, momentary occurrences of violations of one's freedoms must be immediately addressed. Remember the adage, give an inch and take a mile. One cannot give concessions to those who would commit even the slightest of infringements upon First Amendment freedoms or any other freedom for that matter. One must always keep in mind that a true democracy depends on open and free communication, being informed through reporting agencies and journalists in order to make informed decisions about violations of First Amendment rights is a crucial part of this process, and clearly maintaining freedom is everyone's responsibility.